My mother freaked out. She stole quietly $15,000 from me, which I had saved for college, and then kicked me out. Later, she gave $7,000 to my stepsister for her school as an apology for my betrayal. So, here I am, just a month away from heading off to college, and I'm completely broke. And not just regular broke. We're talking every penny of the $10,000 I'd spent years saving? Gone. Just like that. Maybe I should back up and give you the full story though. Growing up, it was just me and my mom, Nicole. My dad wasn't in the picture. He passed away when I was little. I don't have any memories of him, just a handful of old photos and the occasional story from a relative. Mom did everything she could to give me a good life, but money was always tight. She had this mantra, be careful with money. Save every bit you can. And I took that to heart. Starting at 12, I did every odd job you can think of, mowing lawns, babysitting, stocking shelves at the grocery store once I was old enough. Every dollar I made went straight into my savings account. By the time I turned 18, I had managed to scrape together $10,000. That money was my safety net for college, my way to avoid panicking over every little expense. Then Nicole met Dave. That's when everything shifted. Dave, at first, seemed great. He had this big personality, always cracking jokes, lighting up every room he walked into. He had 2 kids from a previous marriage, Justin, who was 12, and Lily, who was 10. At first, I didn't think much of it when they all started coming around more. Mom seemed happy, and she deserved that. But then, it all moved fast. Like, too fast. Before I knew it, they were living with us, and suddenly, my entire world felt smaller. Dave wasn't just the fun, charming guy anymore. He decided he was going to be a father figure to me. He'd make these little digs about how I needed to show respect and learn my place in our new family. My room felt smaller, my privacy disappeared, and so did the bond I'd always had with Mom. Whenever I tried to talk to her about it, she'd wave it off like I was being dramatic. "Oh, he's just trying to help," she'd say, or, "It's an adjustment. We'll all get used to it." I told myself maybe I was overreacting. Maybe it really was just growing pains. Then one day, I came home and found out my savings account had been completely wiped out. Every single dollar was gone. At first, I thought it had to be some kind of mistake. I'd been obsessively keeping track of that account. I knew to the cent what was in there. I called the bank, thinking there was some glitch or fraud. But no. The money had been transferred out, and the bank told me it was authorized by the primary account holder. The primary account holder? My mom. I was furious. I stormed into the living room where Nicole and Dave were lounging on the couch, watching TV like nothing had happened. Without thinking, I blurted out, "What happened to my savings?" The words came out like a shout. And then she hit me with the excuse of the century. Nicole looked me dead in the eye and said she took the money as punishment for my so-called bad attitude toward her new family. She claimed I hadn't been welcoming enough to Dave, Justin, and Lily. According to her, I was selfish and entitled for not making them feel at home. I just stood there, staring at her, completely speechless. I mean, in what universe does wiping out your kid's entire college fund count as a reasonable punishment? That money wasn't handed to me. I worked for it. Every dollar. Every lawn I mowed, every baby I babysat, every shift I spent stocking shelves at the grocery store, it all went into that account. And now it was gone. I started arguing, telling her how insane this was, but she just stared back at me with this cold, blank expression, like I was the one being unreasonable. Meanwhile, Dave just sat there with this smug grin plastered on his face, like he was enjoying every second of my meltdown. The argument spiraled. I told her this wasn't just unfair, it was betrayal. I yelled that she was choosing him over me, her own kid. She just kept repeating that I needed to grow up and accept change. Then, as if her taking my savings wasn't bad enough, she went into this whole spiel about how they needed the money more than I did. Apparently, Dave had debts I had never heard about until this very moment. My hard work, my years of saving, meant nothing. That night, I'd had enough. I packed a bag and left. I didn't even know where I was going at first, but then I thought of my grandparents. They lived about an hour away, and I knew they'd take me in. When I showed up at their doorstep, they were stunned to see me. They didn't ask too many questions right away, but the look in their eyes said they knew something big had happened. Sure, they were aware my mom and I had our differences over the years, but I don't think they realized just how bad things had gotten. Living with them was like stepping into another world. They were kind, supportive, and genuinely concerned about what had gone down. When I finally told them everything, how fast Dave and his kids had moved in, how Nicole had wiped out my savings without a second thought, they were horrified. My grandfather, especially, couldn't wrap his head around it. He just kept shaking his head, muttering under his breath about how much Nicole had changed. For a while, I kept holding on to this hope that my mom would call. Maybe she'd apologize or at least try to make things right. But the weeks ticked by, and the phone stayed silent. Eventually, I found out through a cousin that she'd been spinning her own version of the story to the rest of the family. According to her, I'd left because I couldn't handle her moving on and didn't want to share. She painted me as this spoiled, ungrateful brat who just didn't want her to be happy. It was unbelievable. She was rewriting the entire narrative, making herself look like the victim while I was left picking up the pieces of my life. Meanwhile, I was panicking about what to do next. College was still on my radar, but without that savings, I was back at square one. That's when my grandparents stepped up. They offered to help me financially. But I didn't want to burden my grandparents. Just letting me live with them was already more than I could have asked for. They'd done so much for me without hesitation, and I didn't want to add to their load. The real kicker came about a month after I moved in, a letter from my mom. Not a call, not even a text, but an actual letter. In it, she said she hoped I'd learned my lesson about respecting family decisions. She even hinted that if I showed some miraculous change in attitude, she might consider letting me move back home. Not a single word about the money. No apology. No acknowledgement of what she'd done. It was like she genuinely thought taking my entire college savings was some reasonable form of discipline. I didn't respond. I didn't know how to. I just felt numb. Like I'd lost something I could never get back. That letter was the moment I realized the mom I'd grown up with, the one who raised me, was gone. In her place was someone who seemed to value her new life more than she valued me. Years passed. I managed to get through college, though it wasn't easy. Between scholarships, part-time jobs, and my grandparents' help, I scraped by. I worked hard, kept my head down, and refused to dwell on the past. My relationship with Nicole? It had all but disappeared. And honestly, that was fine by me. Living with my grandparents gave me something I hadn't had in years: stability. They were my rock. Whether it was late-night study sessions or celebrating the smallest wins, they were always there for me. In a way, they became the real family I didn't realize I'd been missing. After graduation, I landed a job in a small city nearby, working at a tech company. It wasn't anything fancy, but it was steady, and for the first time, I felt like I could stand on my own 2 feet. Life was finally starting to make sense again. Then, out of nowhere, I got a call. The number wasn't saved in my phone, and normally, I just let it go to voicemail. Who even answers unknown numbers these days? But for some reason, I picked up. It was my mom. Hearing her voice after all those years was strange. Surreal, even. She sounded cheerful, almost like nothing had happened, like the years of silence and everything she'd done had just vanished. We made small talk for a minute or two. She told me about the weather, asked how I'd been, casual, surface-level stuff. But then she got to the real reason for her call. "So, I wanted to talk to you about Emily," she said, her voice bright with excitement. For a moment, I was confused. Emily. And then it clicked. Emily was the daughter she'd had with Dave after I'd left. She must have been 17 or 18 by now. I barely thought about her, to be honest. She was just someone else's kid. Someone who came into my mom's life long after I'd been shut out of it. She just got accepted into college. Mom announced, her voice swelling with pride. "Isn't that wonderful?" I muttered a polite congratulations, even though I felt zero connection to the news. And then came the real bombshell. "So," she continued, almost casually, "I was hoping you might be able to help out with her tuition. She needs about $55,000, and I thought you could contribute." She wanted me to cover Emily's dorm room expenses. At first, I thought I'd misheard. $5,000? For Emily's college? I barely knew the girl. We'd never had a single conversation, let alone a relationship. But here was my mom, acting like it was perfectly normal to call me out of the blue and ask for thousands of dollars for her other child. When I asked her why she thought this was even remotely okay, she launched into one of her classic speeches. This one was all about family obligations and how supporting each other is what family does. She said that as Emily's older brother, it was my responsibility to help her succeed. It was like she'd completely erased everything that had happened between us. Like she hadn't taken my entire college fund. Like we hadn't gone years without speaking. She talked to me as if we were one big, happy family, as though I were some long-lost relative reconnecting after a casual falling out. I couldn't take it anymore. I cut her off mid-sentence. "Mom," I said sharply, "do you even remember that you took my college savings?" There was silence on the other end for a moment. I thought, maybe, just maybe, she'd acknowledge it. But then she laughed. A light, dismissive laugh. "Oh, come on," she said, her tone flippant, almost playful. "That was years ago. Let's not dwell on the past." My jaw dropped. She talked about it like it was some petty little grudge I was holding on to, like losing everything I'd worked for was just a minor inconvenience I should have gotten over by now. But it wasn't just about the money. It was about the betrayal. It was about the way she'd chosen her new family over me, the way she'd turned her back on everything we'd built together. When I pushed back, she got defensive. Classic Nicole. Suddenly, I was the villain. She hit me with, "I always put a roof over your head. I did everything I could for you, and this is how you repay me." She made it sound like I was the one who had walked out on her, like I was the selfish one. Every word that came out of her mouth was twisted, designed to make me feel guilty for things I hadn't even done. Then she really leaned into the guilt trip. "You don't know what it's like, raising 2 kids on a limited income," she said, her voice rising. She started rambling about how hard it had been for her and Dave after I left, how they'd struggled to make ends meet. And then she hit me with the kicker. "This is your chance to make up for all the support we gave you." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My head was spinning. Every word she said felt like a knife twisting deeper and deeper. Here I was, barely keeping my own life together, scraping by to pay my bills, and she had the audacity to call me out of the blue, not to apologize or ask how I was doing, but to demand money for a half-sister I didn't even know. There was no remorse. No acknowledgement of the pain she'd caused. She didn't even try to mend the bridge she'd burned years ago. All she cared about was what she could get from me. When I told her I couldn't help, her tone flipped instantly. The fake cheerfulness vanished, replaced by something cold and sharp. "You're selfish," she snapped, her voice filled with venom. "You're turning your back on your family. Emily deserves better than this." I was a disappointment. That's how she put it. For refusing to help my own sister. The guilt trips were relentless. She dredged up every little thing she'd ever done for me, every supposed sacrifice she'd made. She painted herself as this selfless saint, a single mom who'd given up everything to raise me. I felt my chest tighten with anger. She wasn't taking responsibility for anything. Not for the money she'd taken, not for the years of silence, not for the way she'd shut me out of her life to prioritize her new family. Instead, she was rewriting history, casting herself as the long-suffering hero and me as the ungrateful villain. Finally, I'd had enough. I told her, flat out, "I'm not paying for Emily's college. I don't even know her. And honestly, after everything you've done, you're lucky I even stayed on this call." There was a beat of silence, and then she hung up. No goodbye. No parting shot. Just the click of a phone disconnecting. But, of course, that wasn't the end of it. A few days later, the texts started rolling in. First, it was a cousin I hadn't heard from in years. Then an aunt. Then, unbelievably, even an old family friend. All of them had the same message, dressed up in slightly different words. "Why won't you help your sister? Family is important." Nicole had been busy. She'd gone to everyone she could think of, spinning her version of the story. According to her, I was some heartless, selfish jerk who wouldn't lift a finger to help my poor baby sister in her time of need. She conveniently left out the part where she'd drained my college fund or how we hadn't spoken in years. To everyone else, she was still the struggling, single mom who'd sacrificed everything for her son, only to be cruelly abandoned when she needed him the most. I wanted to scream. I wanted to respond to every message and lay out the truth, every ugly detail she'd conveniently omitted. But what was the point? Nicole had always been good at spinning stories, at playing the victim. No one would believe me over her. So, instead, I sat down and wrote her one final message. I told her point blank that I wouldn't be paying for Emily's college, that she needed to stop spreading lies about me, and that if she couldn't respect my boundaries, I'd have no choice but to cut off contact for good. I poured everything into that message, all the anger, the frustration, the hurt I'd been carrying for years. When I hit send, I felt a strange mix of relief and exhaustion. Then I blocked her number. And it didn't stop there. I went through my phone and blocked every single family member who'd been guilt-tripping me. I knew they wouldn't understand, and frankly, I didn't care anymore. I was tired of trying to make people see the truth. I had my own life to live. Still, there was a tiny voice in the back of my mind that whispered, "Maybe you should have done more. Maybe you're being too harsh." I wondered if I should have tried harder to mend things, to somehow fix the broken pieces of our relationship. But every time I thought about it, the reality of who Nicole had become, and what she'd done, made it impossible. Maybe one day, Emily would reach out on her own. Maybe then, I could tell her my side of the story. But as far as Nicole was concerned, I was done. She'd already taken so much from me. My money, my peace of mind, my sense of what family was supposed to be. I wasn't about to let her take anything else. Cutting off contact felt like the only option. Blocking her number, shutting out the family members who sided with her, it was supposed to give me the freedom I'd been chasing for years. And for a little while, it worked. For the first time in what felt like forever, I got to live life on my own terms. No guilt trips, no manipulation, no endless cycle of drama. I could breathe again. But, as with anything involving Nicole, it didn't stay peaceful for long. The first sign of trouble came about 2 months later. I was at work, sifting through emails, when my phone buzzed with a notification. It was from an unknown number, so I ignored it. Then another one came in. And another. Each message said the same thing. "It's about Emily. Please reconsider." The moment I saw her name, I knew exactly who was behind it. Nicole. She'd apparently moved on from trying to contact me directly and had taken her campaign to the next level. This time, she'd enlisted distant relatives and even old family friends to do her dirty work. Before I could even process it, more notifications started flooding in. It wasn't just family anymore. Somehow, Nicole had managed to reach out to old neighbors, even people I'd gone to high school with. The messages all followed the same script. "Why won't you help Emily? She deserves a chance." Some of them were pleading, full of guilt-laden appeals about how I needed to step up for my baby sister. Others were outright accusatory, calling me selfish, cold-hearted, or worse. But among all the names that popped up, one hit harder than the rest: Aunt Liza. Liza wasn't just another family member. She was the one person I'd stayed in touch with over the years, even when everything with Nicole fell apart. She'd been like a second mom to me, always supportive, always there when I needed her. Seeing her name felt like a punch to the gut. I opened her message, my heart pounding. "Hey, I heard about Emily," she wrote. "I know things haven't been easy with your mom, but maybe this is a chance to show her that you're the bigger person. Family's complicated, but we're all we have in the end. Don't let one mistake define everything." One mistake. That's what she called it. Liza had always been the peacemaker, the one to see the good in everyone and try to smooth over conflicts. But this wasn't just one mistake. This was years of manipulation. Years of Nicole treating me like an outsider, ignoring me unless she needed something. Years of her choosing her new family over me at every turn. And now, here was Liza, someone who should have known better, asking me to just let it go. To sweep it all under the rug and help Nicole out like it was the simplest thing in the world. Frustration surged through me. No one seemed to understand. No one got it. To them, this was just about a kid needing help with college. They acted like I was some heartless monster for saying no. No one seemed to remember what Nicole had done to me, how she drained my entire college fund and left me to fend for myself. They didn't know about the years of silence, the guilt trips, or how she twisted every situation to make me the villain. That evening, Aunt Liza called. I knew she'd be gentle, she always was, but I was still dreading it. When I picked up, she cut straight to the point. "Why can't you just help her out?" she asked softly, her voice calm and pleading. I tried to keep my cool as I answered. Liza, it's not about Emily. It's about Nicole. She only calls me when she wants money. To her, I'm nothing but an ATM. I can't just pretend everything's fine because she suddenly needs something. The line went quiet for a moment. I could almost hear Liza searching for the right words, trying to find a way to defend Nicole, to excuse her behavior. I know your mom's made mistakes, she finally said, but holding on to resentment won't help anyone. People change. Maybe this is her way of reaching out. I almost laughed. Reaching out. Nicole. It was ridiculous. If she'd wanted to make amends, she could have apologized years ago. She could have asked how I was doing, shown even a shred of interest in my life. But no. She only ever reached out when she needed something. And now, she was using Emily as leverage, a bargaining chip to guilt me into handing over thousands of dollars. I kept my tone steady, though my chest was burning with frustration. Liza, it's not resentment, it's self-respect. I can't keep bending over backward for someone who only cares about me when I'm useful to her. I'm done being her backup plan. There was another pause. I knew my words had hit a nerve. Finally, Liza sighed. I just think you'll regret it if you don't help. Emily's innocent in all this. She looks up to you. You could be a positive influence for her. A positive influence? On someone I didn't even know? Emily wasn't just a half-sister I barely talked to. She was practically a stranger. Someone whose name I'd only heard in passing over the years. And yet, here was my aunt acting like I had some deep obligation to her, as if shared blood automatically erased years of neglect and manipulation. I took a deep breath and tried again. Liza, I don't hate Emily. I don't. But I can't keep enabling Nicole. I won't pay for her mistakes. Not anymore. A week later, another message came through, this time, from Nicole herself. It was an email. It was packed with the usual accusations. Selfish, heartless, ungrateful. She even had the nerve to claim I was abandoning Emily the same way I abandoned her. She didn't stop there. She threw every manipulation tactic in the book at me, trying to make me feel like some kind of monster for standing my ground. But I didn't respond to Nicole's email. I knew better. Anything I said would only fuel her anger, giving her more ammunition to twist the narrative and weaponize against me. I'd spent years learning how to protect myself from her manipulations, and I wasn't about to fall into her trap now. But then came the real surprise, a message from Emily herself. It was polite. Almost too polite, like she was writing to a stranger, which, in a way, she was. She introduced herself, explained that she'd heard I was refusing to help with her college expenses, and said she understood if I couldn't. But then she said something I didn't expect. She wanted to hear my side of the story. For a moment, I just stared at the screen, rereading her message. It felt surreal. Here was this half-sister I barely knew, someone who'd grown up under the same roof as Nicole, reaching out to me with a level of maturity my own mother couldn't muster. I could tell she was hurt and confused, but there wasn't an ounce of bitterness in her words. She didn't lash out or guilt me. She just wanted to understand. I took a deep breath and started typing. I told her the truth. I explained everything. How Nicole had taken my college savings, how she'd cut me out of her life for years, only to resurface when she needed money. I made it clear that my refusal wasn't about her, that I didn't hold anything against her personally. But I also couldn't keep letting Nicole use me. I told her I hoped she could understand and that none of this was her fault. When I hit send, I braced myself for the backlash. I expected anger, accusations, maybe even a scathing message defending Nicole. But Emily's response floored me. She thanked me. She said she appreciated my honesty and admitted that she'd always felt like something was off between Nicole and me. She told me she'd noticed how her mom avoided talking about me, how I was this vague, almost taboo topic in their household. Then she apologized. She said she was sorry for the position I was in and that she understood if I needed to keep my distance from the family. It was like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. For the first time in years, I felt like someone in that tangled mess of a family actually understood. Emily wasn't just blindly loyal to Nicole. She wasn't guilt-tripping me or parroting Nicole's twisted version of events. She saw the truth, or at least she was beginning to. But, of course, that didn't stop Nicole. She ramped up her campaign. The rumors kept spreading. She twisted the story in every possible way to paint me as the villain. Family members who hadn't spoken to me in years suddenly popped up, offering their unsolicited opinions about my responsibility and the importance of family values. It got worse. Some of them even called my job, trying to pressure me through my coworkers. Nicole was like a one-woman wrecking ball, determined to destroy my life because I refused to hand over the money. Through it all, though, I stayed firm. I'd made my decision, and I wasn't going to let Nicole, or anyone else, bully me into changing it. Emily kept in touch. Emily would check in every so often. Just a quick message here and there. No guilt, no hidden agendas, and definitely no requests for money. She never brought up Nicole unless I did, and even then, she tread lightly. I could tell she was grappling with her own complicated feelings about our mom. I did my best to be there for her, in the way I'd always wished someone had been there for me. But then Nicole took things to a whole new level. One day, I got a legal notice in the mail. A demand for back pay for all the years she'd raised me. She was claiming I owed her for the sacrifices she'd made as a single mom. It was laughable, honestly. The sheer audacity of it. But at the same time, it was a gut punch. Nicole was willing to drag me into court to get what she wanted, willing to stoop lower than I thought possible. It was clear now, I wasn't her son to her. I was just a walking bank account, a last resort to bail her out whenever she needed. I spoke to a lawyer, who assured me her claim had no legal standing. It was a baseless, empty threat. But the damage was done. That notice was the final straw. I cut her off completely. I made it crystal clear to every family member, every mutual connection, everyone, that I wanted nothing more to do with her. Nicole was out of my life for good. Emily and I kept in touch, cautiously building a relationship that felt like uncharted territory for both of us. But Nicole, she was gone. And honestly, it wasn't about the money. It had never been about the money. It was about respect, about setting boundaries, about finally standing up for myself after years of manipulation and betrayal. I'd spent too long letting Nicole control the narrative, letting her twist things to suit her needs. That part of my life was over. And maybe one day, she'll realize that losing me wasn't worth the price she paid. But by then, it'll be too late. I'll be long gone, living the life I deserve, free from her toxic grasp. You'd think after all of that, the months of silence, the blocked numbers, my refusal to engage, Nicole would get the message. But if I'd learned anything over the years, it was that my mom didn't know when to quit. She was relentless, always finding new ways to twist the situation and guilt me into giving her what she wanted. It started subtly, or at least as subtle as Nicole could manage. I'd get random calls from distant family members, cousins I hadn't seen in years, my dad's sister, even my grandma's best friend, Lorraine. The messages were always the same. Nicole told me you're being really hard on her. Can't you just let it go? The first call came from my cousin Kelly. I hadn't spoken to her since high school, so seeing her name pop up on my phone was a surprise. At first, I thought maybe something had happened. Maybe she was genuinely reaching out to reconnect. I answered, and the conversation started innocently enough. "Hey, long time no talk," Kelly said, her voice overly cheerful, like she was trying a little too hard to sound casual. We spent a few minutes on small talk, awkward, stilted. But then, just as I was starting to relax, she dropped the act. "So, I heard about the situation with your mom," Kelly finally said, dropping the pretense. Her tone was casual, but her words hit like a freight train. "She told me everything, and honestly, I just don't understand why you're being so stubborn." Stubborn. I could feel my blood pressure rising. Here was someone who hadn't been a part of my life in years, someone who had no idea what I'd been through, acting like she had the full story. Like she knew me. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to stay calm. "Kelly, whatever Nicole told you, that's her side of the story. It's a lot more complicated than that." But Kelly wasn't about to back down. "I get it, okay? I know things haven't always been perfect between you two. But she's still your mom, and you only get one family. Can't you just help her out? For Emily's sake." There it was. The guilt trip. Subtlety had officially left the building. I tried again. Patiently, I explained the years of manipulation. I told her how Nicole only ever reached out when she needed something, never to check in or ask how I was doing. I laid it all out, hoping that maybe, just maybe, Kelly would understand. But she didn't. Family is family, she said, her voice firm and unyielding. You need to be the bigger person. I hung up feeling drained. It was like Nicole had found a way to haunt me all over again, using people from my past to do her dirty work. And Kelly was just the start. The calls kept coming, one after another. Cousins, distant relatives, even acquaintances I hadn't spoken to in years, all spouting the same script. Family. Forgiveness. Loyalty. Every call was another emotional ambush, another exhausting attempt to wear me down. Then came the call from my dad's sister, Aunt Marjorie. Marjorie was a whole different kind of challenge. She'd always been close to Nicole, despite the fact that my dad had been out of the picture since I was a kid. She was old school, the type who believed in unwavering family loyalty no matter the circumstances. The moment I answered, I knew this wasn't going to be a friendly chat. I don't know what's gotten into you, she started, her tone sharp and accusatory. Your mom did her best raising you, and now you're treating her like she's some stranger. Do you think that's right? I tried to explain. Again. I told her that Nicole's version of events was far from the truth. I tried to tell her about the money, the betrayal, the years of silence. But Marjorie didn't want to hear it. Enough with the excuses, she snapped, cutting me off. I don't care what happened in the past. She needs help now. And as her son, it's your duty to step up. It's time you acted like a man and took responsibility. Her words stung, but they also sparked something deeper in me, anger. Here was someone who had barely been a part of my life, someone who didn't know the first thing about what I'd been through, lecturing me about duty and responsibility. She wanted to talk about responsibility. Where was Nicole's responsibility when she stole my college savings? When she chose her new family over me? I took a deep breath and answered firmly, though my voice was tight with emotion. Marjorie, I said, keeping my tone respectful but unwavering, I'm not going to do it. I've spent years trying to make peace with what Nicole did to me. I've moved on, and I'm not going back. I can't be responsible for her choices anymore. Then maybe you're not the son I thought you were, she finished, her voice icy and trembling with barely suppressed anger. I stood there for a moment, letting her words hang in the air. Once they might have stung. Once I might have felt guilty, scrambling to make things right. But not anymore. I'd heard enough of her twisting the truth, warping reality to fit her narrative. Nicole, I said calmly, if you ever actually saw me as your son, you wouldn't treat me like this. You wouldn't see me as just a paycheck. Her jaw tightened, her hands clenching into fists at her sides. That's not fair, she snapped. Do you have any idea what I went through? How hard it was to raise you on my own? And do you have any idea what it felt like, I shot back, my voice rising, to watch you replace me with a new family? To have the mother I depended on steal from me and then disappear for years? Don't talk to me about hard, Nicole. You have no idea. Her face twisted with anger, but I didn't give her a chance to respond. This isn't about Emily, I continued, my voice steady but firm. This is about you. You made your choices, Nicole. And now I'm making mine. I've spent too much of my life trying to fix something you broke. I'm done. For a moment, she just stood there, her expression a mix of anger, frustration, and something else, something that almost looked like regret. But then, just as quickly, her mask slipped back into place. Fine, she said, her tone cold and detached. If you want to throw away your family over a little money, that's your choice. But don't come crying to me when you regret it. I almost laughed. It was classic Nicole, turning the blame back on me, acting like I was the one who had done something wrong. But I didn't take the bait. I won't, I said simply, stepping back and motioning toward the door. Goodbye, Nicole. She hesitated, as if expecting me to cave at the last second. When I didn't, she let out a huff, turned on her heel, and walked away. I closed the door, leaning against it as I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. My hands were shaking, but not from fear. There was a strange mix of anger and relief coursing through me. This time, it felt different. This time, I hadn't let her win. Over the next few weeks, Nicole tried to escalate her tactics. More texts. More calls. More family members being sent to talk some sense into me. But each time, I stood my ground. I repeated the same message over and over. I'm done. I'm not giving you money, and I'm not letting you back into my life. Eventually, the messages started to taper off. Emily kept reaching out, though. She'd check in every now and then, not to ask for anything, just to talk. She never brought up Nicole or money unless I did, and even then, she was careful to tread lightly. I could tell she was struggling with her own feelings about her mom, caught between loyalty and the uncomfortable truths she was starting to see. In her, I saw a chance to break the cycle, to build something genuine. Slowly, we began to form a cautious but meaningful connection. As for Nicole, she'd made her choice, and I'd made mine. For the first time in years, I felt free. As filing a legal claim against me to force my hand, I stood there, holding the letter, my hands trembling, not with fear, but with sheer frustration and disbelief. This wasn't just another guilt trip. This wasn't a barrage of texts or a call from a distant cousin. Nicole had gone to a lawyer. She was trying to drag me into court to force me to pay for Emily's college. The audacity of it was staggering. I dropped the letter onto the counter and just stared at it, trying to process what this meant. Nicole wasn't just relentless, she was unhinged. She was willing to burn every bridge, break every bond, all for money I'd already made clear she wasn't getting. I called my lawyer immediately. They listened as I vented, then reassured me. She doesn't have a case, they said. You're not legally obligated to pay for your sister's education. This is just another tactic to intimidate you. That should have been comforting, but it wasn't. Because it wasn't about the legality of it, it was about what it represented. Nicole was willing to drag me through the mud, to waste time, money, and energy, just to try and control me one last time. After the call, I sat in my apartment, staring out the window, thinking about everything that had led to this moment. The manipulation, the guilt trips, the stolen college fund, the years of silence, followed by sudden demands for money. And now, this. It was a pattern as clear as day. Nicole couldn't accept that I wasn't her pawn anymore. She couldn't stand the idea of not having control over me. And no matter how much she escalated, no matter how hard she pushed, I wasn't going to give in. I composed a response with my lawyer's help, a firm, formal letter rejecting her claim. It was brief, professional, and left no room for misinterpretation. Then I blocked her lawyer's contact information, just as I had blocked her and every flying monkey she'd sent after me. I wasn't done there, though. I decided it was time to take the final step in cutting her out of my life. I started looking into a restraining order. It felt extreme, but what other choice did I have? Nicole had shown time and time again that she wouldn't stop until she got her way. A few days later, Emily reached out. Her message was tentative, almost apologetic. She said she'd heard about the legal action and wanted me to know she had nothing to do with it. She said she was sorry for how things had escalated and that she understood if I needed space. I believed her. Emily wasn't like Nicole. She'd never asked me for money, never tried to guilt me. She'd only ever wanted to understand. I responded honestly, telling her I didn't hold any of this against her. I told her I appreciated her reaching out and that I hoped she wouldn't let Nicole drag her into the chaos. After that, Emily and I kept in touch more regularly. She was cautious, navigating her own complicated feelings about Nicole. But I could tell she was starting to see things clearly, starting to see Nicole clearly. As for Nicole, she didn't get her money. She didn't win. But she didn't disappear either. Not entirely. With her, I knew that nothing was ever really over. There would always be another scheme, another tactic. And when it came, I'd be ready. Because this time, I wasn't the scared kid she could manipulate. This time, I was stronger. This time, I was free. Manipulation, the guilt trips, the sudden demands for money, and now this, Nicole trying to drag me into a legal battle to fund her life choices. My lawyer listened patiently, nodding as I laid it all out. When I finally finished, he leaned back in his chair and sighed. "It sounds like she's grasping at straws," he said. "Legally, you're in the clear. You have no obligation to provide financial support for Emily or anyone else in your family." But what? I asked, already dreading the answer. People like this, manipulative, relentless, they don't stop just because they're wrong. Nicole seems determined to push boundaries, and if this legal stunt didn't work, she might try something else. "We can take steps to protect you, but you need to be prepared for her to escalate." Hearing it laid out so plainly made my stomach twist. I'd known deep down that Nicole wouldn't give up easily, but hearing it confirmed by someone else made it feel more real. "What kind of steps?" I asked. He explained that I could file for a restraining order if the harassment continued, document every interaction, and ensure my legal rights were clear and protected. It was reassuring to have options, but it also solidified just how far Nicole had fallen. This wasn't about family anymore. It wasn't even about Emily. This was about control. Nicole couldn't stand that I'd stepped out of her grasp, and she was willing to burn every bridge to try to reel me back in. I left the meeting feeling a mix of relief and anger. Relief that I had legal support, that there were ways to protect myself. But the anger, that lingered. Nicole's actions weren't just desperate, they were cruel. She'd spun a narrative that made me the villain, guilt people into rallying against me, and now involved lawyers just to punish me for not falling in line. That night, Emily messaged me again. She apologized, even though she had nothing to apologize for. She said she'd heard about the legal claim and wanted me to know she hadn't known about it beforehand. "This isn't what I wanted," she wrote. "I didn't even know Mom was doing this." I believed her. Emily wasn't Nicole. She wasn't part of this mess, not in the same way. I replied honestly, telling her I didn't blame her and that I appreciated her reaching out. "It's not your fault," I said. "But I need you to understand that I can't let Nicole manipulate me anymore. This isn't about you, it's about her. I hope you can see that." Emily's response was simple but heartfelt. "I do. I'm sorry for everything. I really am." Her words brought me a strange sense of comfort, but they didn't erase the damage Nicole had caused. The next few weeks were quiet. Too quiet. I'd thought the lawyer's failure might stop Nicole, or at least slow her down. But with her, silence was never a good sign. It felt like the calm before the storm. And sure enough, the storm came. One morning, I woke up to find my inbox flooded with messages. Family members, old acquaintances, even people I hadn't spoken to in years, all demanding to know why I was letting Nicole down. She'd apparently spun yet another story, painting me as the ungrateful son who wouldn't even try to resolve things peacefully.